those freshwater conditions. Next in line is a new discovery of a pre-pottery Neolithic site. And again, this site is sort of in the heart of northern Arabia, and it's the first time that such a site was identified in a place like Saudi Arabia outside the Fertile Crescent. So we have very characteristic arrowhead types that are very similar to what are found in the Fertile Crescent. And these projectile point types, these arrowheads, are 400 kilometers out of the known range of similar forms. So it means that either populations were in fact migrating out of the Fertile Crescent into northern Arabia when the conditions allowed, when you had those lakes, or ideas. People were in contact by 11,000 years ago and wandering around. Now, one of the interesting things is some of our archaeological sites around 9,000 years ago are in association, very close association with what we think are Neolithic rock art sites. And so we're trying to put together a story about the rock art and the archaeology, which has not really been done before. And so there's indications that these are hunter-gatherers, but also they may have domestic animals as well. One of the things, we're sort of getting towards the end here, that we're looking at is the question of how long have modern peoples been in a place like Saudi Arabia. And there are current models that have been developed out of Southeast Arabia which have suggested that drought conditions have either led to big-scale sort of remodeling of culture change, or droughts like this one, which is about a 600-year drought, about 5,000 to 6,000 years ago, actually led to a depopulation and abandonment of Southeast Arabia. So it was so severe that populations actually couldn't survive in Southeast Arabia at the time. And this is actually called the Dark Millennium in Southeast Arabia. Well, the rest of Arabia hasn't been looked at, really. So we got together with the German team, which is working in Tama, and we've been doing an awful lot of work in Juba. And we put our heads together and our new evidence that we've all been collecting independently. And one of the first things that we started to realize was that, in fact, we had archaeological sites that were persisting through those droughts. And so we think that there wasn't whole-scale abandonment of places like Saudi Arabia. But what we think is happening is this coalescence of groups around oases. And groups, populations, have finally figured out what to do in those hyper-arid situations. And that is the tapping into the groundwater, right? So the famous Qanat systems and wells. And so people are able to, I believe, figure out, how they can live through severe droughts. And I think this might be one of the very first times that people can actually do this. So before this, people were very mobile, and we have questions about what happened to them in hyper-arid situations. But very clearly, I think by 8,000, 9,000 years ago, people were living through the drought periods. And I think that's because they figured it all out. They knew where to get those freshwater resources, and they could even tap into it. And so genetics shows that the modern people of Arabia extend back at least 10,000 years ago, if not before. And I think the archaeological record is starting to support that view. Okay? And so putting it all together, we are starting to, this is horrible. This is unreadable, unfortunately. It's, you can flip the chart over. What we're trying to do is look at this concept of green Arabia, the wetting of the landscapes and the aridity. And we're putting all the data together And we're trying to tell that story. So here we go back to at least 400,000 years ago, all the way up to the present. And we're trying to look at the relationship between the wetting of the landscapes and the drying. And we think every single wet period that we can document is an expansion of populations. There's no doubt about that, I think, now. Question is, what happened when it got arid? We're finding some of those lakes still survive even in the most arid periods. So populations may have held on temporarily, but again, we just don't know what happened to the populations when it, did they survive? Did they persist? Or did they actually go extinct? I think there's actually a lot of extinction events in the past. But by the last 10,000 years, and maybe up to the last 20,000 years, I think populations figured it out. And so they lived in places like Arabia consistently, even through all the droughts and the arid periods. Okay. 5 more minutes?
You covered it all.
5 more minutes, okay. Bear with me. So we're trying to put that whole story together. And it's only been a couple years. And we need a lot more work in order to, not just us, but probably many other teams, to work all across Arabia to try to figure out this story. But I think it's starting to come together. And what I just simply want to close with is some things that are both sort of current research and education, but also what we might be able to do in the future. Carolyn mentioned the Green Arabia conference that we had in April in Oxford, and this was wonderful. It was just really excellent time, but also the level of support that we're starting to get for this project. Prince Charles was invited only in the last 2 weeks before the conference, couldn't make it, but delivered a fantastic video address, very much tailored to this question of climate change. He's very interested in climate change, so he's really supporting this research. And Prince Sultan bin Salman, the president of the SCTA, is very much supportive of this work. And at the Green Arabia conference, he announced the formation of the Green Arabia Center. And he wants to continue this work. He believes it's very important for understanding the relationship between human populations and climate change, both in the past, how we can use the past as a potential predictor of the future. So we're getting high-level support for this work, which is fantastic. And I just want to say that, I think there's an awful lot that could be done in the future as well in terms of educating the public. And I think that it's not only in the last few thousand years that exhibits should be developed and literature should be developed, but also the archaeological record within the last 1,000,000 years should be brought to light. And so I'd like, in Saudi Arabia, they're building 14 new museums, and we're really emphasizing the need to tell the long-term story as well. The media, we have found that the media is very interested in this story as well, both in Saudi Arabia as well as the international media. It's really fantastic to even see, things being developed on children's websites and such. So that's all been good, and we want to do a lot more of this in the future. We're also trying to reach out to the people of the Middle East, the Arabic-speaking world, and so we're trying to do our best in terms of lecturing across the Middle East, inviting people, governors of provinces, governors of towns and cities, and we've even tried to translate our website into Arabic, so people of the region, oftentimes in the past, people would do the work, leave, and it get published, and that's it. But we really need to reach out to the public, and this is something that we have begun to do, but we want to do a lot more of in the future. And sort of a dream of mine is actually trying to get more people from the Middle East, particularly places like Arabia, to actually come and study and to get training, because quite honestly, there's a lack of very well-trained people to do this work, and I really want to encourage people of the Middle East and Arabia to be learning all the techniques from the field to the lab, and really get that going. There's been very little of this, actually. So it's something in the future we really need to get online. And there's an awful lot of research to do. I mean, I told you about 10,000 lakes, and so we've only worked on a few. And those lakes are amazing. This is a lake record just from Juba. And that lake record is 60 meters deep. We've only worked on the top 15 meters. You can see how precarious that is. So this is just an example of a study that needs to be done. In East Africa, they're drilling all these lakes. And this is very expensive work and very tedious work. And it's something that's never been done in Arabia. And so we're trying to get this going and stimulating this kind of work. And these lakes of Arabia tell a story. There's no doubt about it, about environmental fluctuation through time. It's an completely untold story, which we'd like to bring to the forefront in the next few years. And we have been publishing as much as we can. We have an army, and we're publishing as much as we can to advertise to scholarship and to learn as much as possible. But our project it goes till 2017, but really a lot of the financial support for that is only going to last about another year. So we need to figure out ways to get other teams working on this kind of project in the next 10 years. And so we need to keep up that momentum. We're starting to fill that blank spot, but a lot more work really needs to be done. So I'd really like to keep this momentum up in the next few years. And so finally, thank you.